All right, welcome to the Stampscapes lab. We're going to try a monochromatic spot-colored vertical slimline formatted scene here with nature set number 5, with the addition of the Palm Island here. By spot color, I mean a monochromatic format with just a pop of color. Okay, now I've done this type of thing before with how I'm going to approach this one. There's going to be this red sun up top here in the corner, and the rest of it is going to be grayscale. Okay, now I've done that with the mystic imagery a lot to give it the spirit of a Chinese ink painting type of look, or attempted to at least. And I thought I would do it with this set here. I've been playing around with this set a lot over this last, I don't know, maybe a week, 2 weeks or so. And I thought, let's give it a try with this one right here. So what we have is kind of a separation of layers, okay, that represent distance. Okay, so lower on the horizon, or on the scene represents something closer, okay? And normally I would fill in these areas in between spaces right here. There would be a little bit extra wave small right in here and the wave small again down here, or I can use the medium wave or something like that. But I've created these spaces in here, even between the great wave and these medium waves right here. We have this little space in here. And we're going to fill in those gaps with some additional white pigment ink after I get these areas toned in. And up here, I don't have anything. I might be able to put like an island or something like that in the background. Maybe I should, just to create another layer of space. Otherwise, this is all going to be white except for this sun up here. Or I could put like a quote up here too. Sometimes you have to kind of think about that. The quote stamps sometimes take the place of other types of objects, and you kind of have to work your compositions around them. But this is the basic area for it right now, our scene. And that's the foundation, I should say. Okay, so let's get to toning here. Okay, so the concept of this, because we have these different distances and layers separated by this, what's going to be like mist and clouds, in the form of like churning water and, whatever, spray mist and things like that, if it was, or it is the ocean right here. So normally I tone from kind of darker down here and lighter up here because light sources are coming in and we have things kind of top lit. But in this, because we have this bottom lit areas like this right in here and like this, we go a little bit heavier with the toning up top and down, okay? So that's what's kind of really different for me, because this one's going to be kind of top lit right here because I got a color underneath this wave. Well, I don't know. I guess it's bottom lit. I guess the wave's going to be top lit, but I don't know. It's kind of doing things in a little bit of reverse in some ways. I'm going to start off with some colored pencil here just to kind of lock down a little bit of this tone. And then what I'm going to do, because I want to go in and give it a little bit more of this watercolory look, I'm going to use my watercolor pencils, and I have a gunmetal gray. It's called gunmetal, and this one here is ivory black. Hopefully it's not real ivory, but I think they're just talking about that in terms of the tone. And then this is just a black Prismacolor pencil. So this one won't go back into, it won't go into solution when I add water to it. So this one will kind of be locked down. And what I'm going to do in here is add a little bit of extra grayscale into my waves. And if you're kind of wondering, well, I don't know where to add that, you're just kind of adding it to the areas that are already darker existing. Okay, so this is like a really light gray right in here, right? Because these are black dots, but they're condensed, and then there's space in between them a little more to make it look like a lighter gray, but indeed it's just all black. Because I stamped it out in black here, but what you're doing is I'm just going in and adding kind of a, think about, even if you're adding black here, think about adding like a 10 to 15% gray in here. Okay, now see in here, we're going from darker to lighter down here. So I'm going a little bit darker up top and then going a little bit lighter down below. So it might look something like this. Okay, let's try to do this, where it's like really harsh down below right here. You want it to transition. Okay, so I'm going a little bit more up here, and then you're using just a really light touch like this. Okay. And then as you go down, you're just kind of tapering it off like this, kind of do a little wisp type of, as graceful a motion as you can. Okay. But all you have to do is just think about it like using a light touch. Okay. Now for me, I'm not quite sure how dark to go, so, because I haven't done these watercolor types of looking pieces too often. I've done it a few times now, but I don't do it really often. And I don't remember if I've used the colored pencil with the watercolor pencils. I don't know if I've used them in conjunction with one another. I think I've probably colored with this and just kind of gone back into it. But I'm kind of like refining my style or whatever, or still, I don't know. I don't know if it's refinement, it's still kind of experimenting. Just to see what it would look like, So, sometimes maybe if I put some areas back into solution, maybe it goes too light with the watercolor pencils, where maybe it's good to have some kind of color already kind of locked down. I don't know, that's my, that's my, whatever, concept here that I'm doing. And if I've done it before, I don't remember, but we'll see how it goes here. So this is it. This is a kind of a, first of all, if you're kind of going monochromatic, it's going to be a faster, a faster type of card, just because you're not going through layers and layers of color or using multiple tones. Like in this one, you might use, for me, I might use, I don't know, maybe 3 tones of blue with colored pencil. Then I would probably use a little bit of alcohol ink, and then I would use, acrylic paint pens, something like this. This one's just like black, black colored pencil and black, watercolor pencils. So it comes around pretty fast. And it's a really good exercise too. It's not just like, it's not really, I wouldn't call it a minimal approach in terms of end result. I think, I think it makes a pretty full statement. In terms of the overall look, I don't feel it's missing something, okay? I do love kind of grayscale and things like black and white artwork in general, photography and prints and drawing. Okay, so we're almost done with this black colored pencil. I think that's looking pretty decent, and I can get some intermediate tones. Like I said, I'm kind of not quite sure of how far to go with this, because I have, my gray watercolor pencil and my black one too, so I'm going to be using those as well. Okay, now see it right in here. What I'll do is I'll go with this top layer of the sand pattern stamp. Oh yeah, that one doesn't come in major set number 5 either, but all of the waves, the long border here. So I'm transitioning it from kind of darker up there and lighter down below. Surfers always have their kind of they call it, I think it was called contrapposto. So when they're carrying their boards, especially a really long board like that, there's a certain weight to it. So I have the weight kind of established on a certain hip. Sometimes I see these designs of surfers and they look so awkward because they don't have the distribution of weight correct in the drawings. So I notice things like that because the surfing is like a really well, like a lot of sports, there needs to be a certain type of grace to it, and they call it flow. So even when they're kind of just walking with a board or standing there, there should be a certain type of kind of spirit to it. You really want it to, surfers kind of pride themselves in kind of harmonizing with the waves, and that's a real big kind of factor in things like style. Okay. And each surfer, they kind of have a different, they surf kind of differently. So a lot of times, like surfers, you can see them like, standing on shore or something like that, and you can tell who they are from a distance, just kind of the way they stand. I'm not gonna like pro surfers or something like that, that we used to watch on, compete at different contests and things like that. Okay, so I think we have that pretty well established just like that. I've got a little bit darker down here and a little bit lighter in the distance, so it's a little bit darker. These two areas are about the same darkness, but it gets a little bit lighter as we move up there. And I'm thinking about that sun right up here, but I'm wondering if I should go with like some kind of other island up here or something like that. I thought about some other palm trees in the distance, like right here, and then go with a sun. I'm thinking about this sun right up here in the corner, so I don't want to cover anything up too much. And I'll look into like some word stamps too. Okay, but let's try some of this gunmetal gray here. From a textural standpoint, I feel like this gray is a little bit softer than the black colored pencil, and the black colored pencil is pretty soft. In relation to other colored pencils, it's one of the softer ones that I have. The Prismacolor. They've all kind of changed consistencies from what I've been told. I have the barrel, like really super old ones. But I think in general, I've been told the Prismacolors are pretty soft in comparison to some of the other brands still. On some colored pencil forms, I've noticed the terms there, the description of like buttery. But if those are buttery, then these Derwent's watercolors are pretty soft as well. Like maybe even more buttery. I'm largely putting this where I've already placed the black colored pencil. I think this looks just fine as is, without going in with that watercolory type of touch on here. But I want to make it look a little bit more fluid in here by adding that watery touch, because this is water in here too. So, it might just kind of add to that entire, you know, what I was talking about, that spirit. It's like the spirit of the ocean type of thing. All right, black. I'll kind of focus this a little bit more in those darker areas, okay? Or we'll start it off there at least. One of the things is I'm doing is I'm kind of going along with the flow of that wave. So this, you know, this area under the wave, it has this curve. So I'm kind of going with that curve in terms of my application of this media, okay? Now, see, the slope on these other ones is a little bit different. Here's this slope down here on this side of the wave. So I'm adding this in that direction, okay? And you can add it in a very smooth way. You can do it like this, where it's, you know, it's one continuous tone, but you're kind of adding it. But I'm kind of going a little bit like this and putting some space in between each one of those. I mean, not everywhere, but I might add some smooth and I'll kind of go in like this so that I see a little bit of that shape. Now, when I add water to it, if any of that remains, I don't know. You know, we'll see. Maybe it just kind of puts it all into solution. But I do think that, you know, you can capture some of the gesture of these waves and of these forms in here by going in that, whatever, that spirit, that angle or whatever. In this case, it's more like arcs right here. All right, I think that is it right there. So, a pretty quick toning process. I am still thinking about this area up there, if that's just too bare. Let me see if I have a quote stamp or something that I want to add up there before I kind of tone things in, or, you know, with add those water effects up here, and see if there's anything else up here that I want. Maybe my smaller palm cluster out here in the distance might be kind of cool. And then, I don't know if I would add, I might add like the sun coming from behind some palm trees right up here, as opposed to just this isolated ball up there. That might be kind of interesting. And that would kind of balance off this area right here. Everything's kind of aiming this way, including the wave. But then if I counterbalance it a little bit out here in the distance, that might be a kind of a good way to go. Okay, we're going to add in this palm cluster, but what I'm going to do is, what I've been doing is I've been wiping off the bottom of these a little bit, like that. So there's a little bit less ink down below, and then I dab off a little bit like that, about midway up or so, to remove some of that ink, so that hopefully it stamps out from a little bit darker to a little bit lighter down here, or a lot lighter. This one's, I dabbed off quite a bit. Like, see down here, those stalks aren't as black as right over here because I've wiped some of that off. Because of this whole idea of this kind of separation of forms from light to dark like that. And let's go about right here or so. All right, so see that? It's really light like that. And we'll put our sun up that way. I'm not quite sure if I should add in like some tone in here or not, you know, to kind of anchor that down, or if that should be just like by the time it, you know, it's darker and gets lighter and lighter up here, maybe that's like really light. And then we have that, you know, that sun right up here. But I should heat set that a little bit. And that's our kind of our foundation there. It's been really fun. I haven't used this set too much because it's kind of a little bit more of a niche set, you know, waves and ocean and surfing like that. You don't have to use the surfers with this set, but yeah, I've been playing around with it a lot more over this last couple weeks, and it's been really fun. Okay, so let me go get some water and we'll start adding in. It's not going to change too much, but we'll try to add in a little bit more of this kind of fluid look with the water soluble, you know, the watercolor pencils here, and we'll see if we can't get some, you know, like a little fluid kind of, I don't know, whatever textures into this piece. Just some water, and what I found for me, by the way, this is a semi-gloss cardstock. It's not watercolor paper, so nothing really thick. What I do is I remove some of that water off of here, and then I just kind of go into these spaces, and I just kind of extend out. I'm kind of roughly kind of going in that same direction to start off here. I don't want to add in too much water. Again, this isn't watercolor paper, so it's not going to, you know, be like super kind of absorbent. I mean, this is a porous paper, but yeah, not watercolor paper or anything kind of the sort. Okay. All right, but see, we're getting a little bit of this. This is going back into solution, and again, since I've added in those touches of or I don't know, foundation of colored pencil, you know, we still get some of that texturing in there, but it is putting a lot of this paint into solution, like really almost like instantly. It like dissolves it right away, which, you know, watercolor pencils, you know, I guess it's supposed to do that. So, but yeah, a little bit. Like some in here, I probably added a lot of the colored pencil, so that's not going. It's kind of like having to kind of remember where. Okay, now right in here, that really kind of dissolved really nicely. I guess that was a lot of the watercolor pencil right there. And then you can kind of extend out like this, some of those grayscale tones like this, and transition them down here in like a very subtle way. It's like almost like a 1% gray or something like that. Same thing up there. I think I'll be able to do that too. Yeah. Okay. Now, see, that's almost too much water there. You know, I'll remove some of it so that it doesn't dissolve that whole thing too fast, and you know, have me drag out like too much of that black and gray too fast. Okay. And some of these areas, I don't know, it might maybe you remove or spread out too much of that ink. That's what I was trying to kind of avoid by using the colored pencil in there. Sometimes if I tone things out and then I go back in with this, it like dissolves all of that shading that I did and it just kind of drags it out evenly. So that's what, that's where that colored pencil in theory comes into play. But see this right here? These really super graceful tones of the watercolor pencil. I think look pretty good like that. I'll try to extend it even more like this with some additional water now that I kind of see what it looks like there. All right, then we'll get this lower portion. I'm just kind of going like right along that and then kind of dragging it down this way, okay? Okay, I think that is about it. We'll let this dry a little bit. It's a little bit wet. I don't know if I can show that. And right now it's a little bit kind of rippled. So yeah, we'll let this set up. I'll kind of let it dry naturally. Sometimes when it starts to get kind of warpy with all that water in it, sometimes I feel like if I dry it with heat setting, it has a little bit of a I don't know, it's not as flat. I think I'm gonna end up mounting it anyways, and that kind of flattens it out. But I don't want it too kind of wavy in there. So if I just kind of let it set for a while and do a little bit less heat setting, sometimes I think that might serve it a little bit better. All right, this has now had a chance to dry for about 5 minutes or so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kind of extend out these top portions of some of these kind of white caps, as they call them. And we'll do that with a acrylic white paint pen like this. And it's just kind of softening the that transition of that little white cap to this shaded area down below. Okay. I won't do this everywhere, but it just kind of expands on the texturing in here. And okay, I'm doing it in some of these lighter areas as well, and that gives it a little bit of a kind of extra energy, I would say, because it's like the water has a certain type of shimmer to it when it's being lit. Now I'm gonna do some splatter painting over this too, so how much I need to do this, I don't know. I don't really know until I add in that splatter painting. But so far it looks pretty good. It's giving me that little kind of sparkly shimmer in some of these areas in here, like the grayscale areas. White over white doesn't show up at all. So, and in some of the darker areas, maybe I don't want to add too much of it because it really stands out a lot. So, or you can just add less in those areas, but it has a really good look to it in a subtle way, I would say. Okay, so see this down here where this transitions. I try to, give it that wispy kind of graceful transition, as I was mentioning, with your application of, your pencil applications. But this also kind of softens it up, as will some additional white pigmenting. So if you don't get these nice kind of graceful transitions like that, don't worry about it, because you can still do that with this other media, that we apply in here anyway. So, but you try to get it as graceful as you can, each step of the way. But if you add the things that I add in here in the end, it's there's other ways to compensate for kind of less than desirable applications of any of the given steps. Okay. Going in here in the sand, kind of doing it, adding a little bit more of this texturing from the bottom up. This isn't water in here anymore, but kind of sand has its own kind of glistening, shimmery look to it. One of the things I didn't mention when I was toning this in is I kind of add a little bit more of a shadow at the base of our, subject matter here, our focal point of the long border. Like that. All right. Kind of subtle. And I have this larger one here. And we can add some of these areas down in here. Kind of gives a little bit of a larger texture. Now that stands out because it's kind of wet and glistening right now, but it's going to be a lot more subtle when it dries. It does look pretty bold right now, though, doesn't it? Let's see those like harder textures like that. Or, I don't know, whatever, bolder textures, I should say, not harder. Okay, so there's that. Now those dots of paint, you can see they're real glistening like that. That's because they're wet and it's kind of capturing that light like that. It'll kind of dry a little bit like that, but it's going to be less shiny because it's just not going to be wet. But these little dots of paint like this, not so much this one because it's a little bit more watery and it kind of absorbs into the paper, but it gives it a little bit of extra kind of texturing. It is raised a touch from the surface. But let's go in and add in some additional paint pen work here. This is the Dr. Martens Bleed Proof White, and I'll put a little bit of paint in the end of my toothbrush here. Yeah, if you're using these toothbrushes, you probably don't want those ones with those kind of rubber gum stimulators on them. Okay, now just to make sure I don't get a blob of paint on here, I'm tilting this up so if it drips, it's going to drip down here, okay? And I'll be pretty aggressive with this in terms of my adding this splash. I'm going to try to not get too much on the surfer if I do at all. And this splashing can kind of go over everything in here. I'm going to add it, a lot of it kind of down in here. And you can see I'm getting it all over my hand here, but see that? All of that right in there. It gives it that kind of extra motion. There's a little bit of texturing in here and contrast. See that? A little bit of a white. And you can see some of that white splattered up in this area like this. I kind of splattered it all over in here. I mean, some of it is really fine, and you can't really see it too much. But I just gotta blob of it right there on my surfboard. So I'm going to wipe that off a touch, like that. And that should be good. We'll let this dry here and set up, and then we'll go into our spot colored sun right up top here. And also I'll do a little assessment if I need to kind of add in some shadows. And I didn't add in a little bit of extra white pigment ink in here. Yeah, that'll add in kind of a soft look over some of these areas, but this has to all be dry for me to start patting in some of that white pigment ink into the mix. Otherwise, I'm going to be, kind of smearing some of these wet applications. The Dr. Martens is already dry, but this one right here needs to dry, so it's kind of a big dot of white paint there. All right, we're going to add in some additional tone here, lightness. Now right here, there's this line right across this base here that's really consistent. I need to kind of alter some of this by making some of this a little bit lighter in here, just so it's not so, I don't know, straight and it needs variation in here. So see, I'm kind of making this area lighter right in here. Let's do the same thing over here. So we're going kind of softer, darker, softer over here, lighter, from a textural standpoint. And some of this can kind of go into the lower waves down here too, just to vary this wave. It's a little bit too straight, so we need to put a little bit more kind of dynamics into it, I guess. So see that kind of that glowing wave right there, and see this right here, that light is on the top of that wave right there. And we can leave this as is over here just to vary it a little bit. So we're adding some of this right over in this area. So let's stagger it. So it's like right here, and then let's go right down here. Okay, so it's kind of like, instead of putting it right down here, we'll put it over here. This is already really light in here anyway, but let's go up in this. It kind of makes it a little bit more dreamy looking. I mean, this is like a stylized, version of a, I don't know, whatever, ocean scenario here. Okay. Then we have this nice straight, crisp line right in here. I think I want to keep that right in there. So let's kind of vary this right over here a little bit and see how that puts that light right there. Okay. And maybe we could do a little bit up here. See, it's just a little bit lighter right there, so it's like dark, light, dark. I mean, it's just in a real subtle way. It's nothing, no big deal. Adding some of that right in here, making those waves a little bit more distant. And then remember how we kind of wiped off some of this stamp before stamping it out, but then I'm just going and refining it a little bit more and making it a little bit lighter like that. And then down here too at the base of this one. So these palm trees are all the same. They're all the same value, but then I'll kind of go and bottom light them a little bit like this. And see, like a couple of these trees are now lighter. And now you have some areas of light and dark within that form. So it's a little bit more, there's like a push and pull, with that lighting on there. Push and pull, what I mean by that is, when you can see that lighter version, it looks like that tree is farther back in the distance, and some of these are closer to it, so it's almost like you're pushing back, and or pulling forward the ones that you don't put some of that ink on. That tree up there got a little bit lighter just in the impression, so I'll just kind of double down on that by making that lighter like that, you know. So it's like if something happens, like, oh my God, part of my stamp didn't stamp out, then you can just, you can, if you're doing it with a stamp positioner, of course, you can just restamp it and make it darker. But if it just doesn't stamp out, I'm doing it with acrylic blocks, I'm not going to take the time to restamp it. I mean, you can just, make it lighter, just kind of inherently like that. Or whatever. Make it look kind of naturally lighter. So it looks like it's in some lighting or mist or something like that. And let's do the same thing with our character right here. He's kind of standing in some mist like that. Now I got that little, bit of ink right there. I'm just gonna, you can use your white pen like a little correctional fluid. Okay, and that probably will be it in terms of the gray aspect of it. I might hit some areas in here. Let's go back to our black colored pencil and add in, a little bit more contrast in here, maybe. I say maybe because I'll add in and I'll see how it looks as I apply it. If I don't like it, then I'll stop applying it. It'll just be a little bit darker. A little bit more shaded. I'm gonna, we added all this kind of pigment ink in there. Maybe it got too light everywhere, so you can kind of just add in a little bit of that tone back into some of these areas, or just hit it with a little pop of, a little bit, I wouldn't say darkness, but a little bit darker in here. Just like that, it kind of, reestablishes a little bit more contrast. And like maybe up here, just maybe at the very top of like this wave right here. Something like that, it's just kind of like a little bit of darkness among like these more grayscale kind of applications. All right, so we'll go with our sun in here. Let me go get my, I'll find my, oh, I have it right here. A little circle like that. And I think I'll have the sun kind of coming up from right in here. That will probably leave room for a little bit of a quote stamp right up there too, which we'll kind of consider doing. But let me get my tones of ink. All right, kind of a range of tones like this, dye-based inks. Range of values too. This is like a brilliant yellow here. Okay, I'm taking some of it off like that, as you can see. And we'll add it in like, I'm going to have it kind of peeking out from right underneath, or behind, I should say, not underneath. Right behind my palm trees, like so. Okay. And I'm doing the full, this is a 1-inch hole punch circle here, like that. I gotta make sure that I don't get like any below that area. Okay, so we have that. And then what I do is I'm going to transition this up this way. So it'll be a little bit lighter at the base of the sun. So I'm adding this down from the top down. Okay, so I can kind of see what's happening here. And I'm leaving about, I would say about a 1/4 inch of just that pure yellow down at the base. Okay. It's kind of hard to see because, but I went to about right here with that last color. And then we'll go probably about midway, I'm guessing, with the red here. I just, you know, I don't know. That's just a guess. We'll see how far I end up kind of transitioning. Let's get a good amount of red on here, and we'll start at the top, okay? And I'm going to stay up there for a little bit longer, okay, so I can tap off some of this and blend it in. Kind of going with a really light touch. Don't kind of like speed it up. Get it, try to get it more with repetition than with pressure and you know, whatever expediency. And then this one's a pretty dark English red. And I'll go with some of this. It might not be English red looking because I'm putting it over the top of all these other colors, but see this, you gotta start tapping it up here and just go into it, but I'd say that's about 1/8 of an inch or so. Now watch this. I'm gonna stay up here for longer now, like a lot longer. Okay, you can even wipe some of it off like this. And we'll go with that. Before kind of going down now. So I'm doing this with a really light touch like that. Now see that down there, it's a little bit heavy and it's not blended anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to yellow right here. And then I'll choose, I'm going to get a clean part of this paper towel here. Or you can use whatever, your sponge or whatever you're using. This, we'll go back to this right here. And we'll try to blend up now from the base up like this. And that's kind of blending in that red a little bit more. And see this is getting some of that red in here, so I got to make sure that I don't go down quite so far with that. But then we get this. It's like a, what they call in silkscreen printing, it's a split fountain like that. So a little bit of this spot color like that. No, that'll dry and it'll look a little bit lighter, but we'll get this kind of matted off. It kind of looks weird, you know, with just that little spot color like that, but it looks really cool when you kind of get this matted off with a little bit of color, so I'll go with like a gold framing around it. Like I did with the mystical kind of Chinese kind of ink painting looking ones. But I also think that I want to go with some sort of word or quote stamp up top there. It's going to have to be something that kind of fits in there, but we'll see what I have in the scenic sentiment sets. There's so many different word and quote stamps in there of different sizes, which is the kind of the idea of that. So you can kind of think about adding something in kind of you know, as an afterthought almost. But we'll see what I have there, and we'll get this finished off. All right, we have our color in here now, thus me being in color. And we have this little bit of this gold around here. And I really like that look in terms of this type of structuring right here with the kind of that Chinese ink painting type of look. You know, it's like black lacquer frame type of thing going on with a little bit of that, I don't know, whatever, gold inlay or whatever you call it like that. But that gold kind of relates to the, you know, that warm sun type of thing in there. And it just kind of brings the whole thing together. So anyways, spot coloring right here. Relatively fast. I mean, there were some things that I did on here that were really quite subtle that, you know, we can kind of, you know, do or not do, and it's not going to really make that big of a difference, you know. The watercolor, you know, you can just go straight watercolor brushes or pencils, or you know, just use your colored pencil or something like that. I do think that the white pigmenting kind of texturing in here adds quite a bit, but the watercolor pencil thing too was kind of for me to get a little practice in with those, that medium, because I don't do those too often. But I don't know, I like the overall look and the different textures that were achieved. I like this quote stamp right there too. I've used that with the kind of that rising sun type of thing. This kind of relates to surfing too. They always used to refer to surfing like contest surfing and like performance surfing, stuff like that. Was really big in the 80s, maybe in the 90s too, a little bit, but especially in the 80s it seemed. But then you started hearing about like, you know, people being more like a soul surfer or something like that. They weren't into like, you know, so much performance types of tricks and things like that. It was more just the essence of surfing. A lot of it was longboarding too, you know, where it's like you're not really, you know, it's not like a contest out there in the waves. You're just kind of out there to have some fun. You don't need to be really seen or, you know, something like that either. It's just kind of going out for yourself. And so that kind of relates to the imagery right here too. That is longboard like that too. Yeah. All right. So, anyways, hope you like the card and kind of overall look, and you know, it's a pretty fun way to work in grayscale. If you do that, you know, kind of try to achieve like a nice range of tones, like from dark to light, and you know, I would, you know, utilize texture too to get some rich variation in here. You know, you have your soft and kind of sharp areas in here, and it kind of creates this illumination like that too. On this piece right here, one of the things I didn't mention was like I added this kind of sloping area down here, and that adds a little bit of additional kind of visual movement into the scene. All right, thanks again. Thanks as always for tuning in to the Stampscapes channel.